I want to talk to you guys about something. I know what we witnessed the other night was scary. I know that we were all at the edge of our seat. I know we were all praying that Ryan Preece was going to be okay. I'm not going to lie. My heart jumped more than once at Daytona. I felt the Ryan Blaney hit was as vicious as they come. I had no idea what we were in store for later in the evening. As a matter of fact, if I could compare it to any Daytona with two massive wrecks, would of course be the 2001 Daytona, where Earnhardt hit the wall and Tony Stewart flew through the air. Ryan Preece luckily walked away, and Ryan Blaney luckily walked away from from each of their incidents. We have discussed so many times the safety of this car, and at times I think that we've just been a little bit overreactive. Of course, this is coming off the same weekend that Kurt Busch announced his retirement. NASCAR seen something wrong with the car, and they went and fixed it. We've not had the issue with Kurt Busch happen since that incident. We've also not had a driver die of a vascular skull fracture. So there's been a couple that have happened since then, speaking of Steve Parks. And I believe another driver as well. I can't mention right now. Maybe it was Ernie Irvin for the second time. No, I think that was the first time. Anyway, my point is, every time that there's something major that happens in the sport, NASCAR reacts to it, and they fix it. The Ryan Newman situation back in 2020, that was, what saved Ryan Newman's life was NASCAR had fixed something that they felt needed to be fixed. And so, as I've heard since Daytona, we've got to stop racing this style racing. Our cars are too fast. You come off the words of Kyle Larson saying he feels safer in a sprint car than he does at Daytona. Guys, seriously, we just had two of the worst incidents of the year in the same race. Both drivers walked away. Both drivers were okay. NASCAR goes to the end of the world to make these cars as safe as they can, and anybody that doesn't believe that's crazy. And I've listened to podcast after podcast, and I've heard the concerns that maybe we shouldn't be racing a car that's not as safe as the other. Well, by gosh, there was people that Dale Jr. got hurt in the other car, right? It ended his career. No matter what we do in the sport of racing, somebody is going to get hurt some way, somehow. And it's just part of the sport. You can't take that out of the sport. So before we go and wish them that they would turn Daytona into a road course race and taking us off the speedway because it's too, quotation in the air, dangerous, I think that you should really realize what you're asking here. You're asking to change a sport that is relished on the danger factor for the 70 years it's been around. Of course these guys are putting their lives in danger. Of course, the first thing out of Ryan Preece's mouth when he was able to get on Twitter was, man, it's time to get back in there and do it again, right? I mean, that's the sport that we love. And I'm not trying to change it. I'm not trying to overreact. I'm not trying to not go to speedways anymore, super speedways, because of the danger factor. As a matter of fact, these are the biggest selling races in NASCAR. Joe Logano tends to believe that we should only go to one racetrack a year. I'm telling you, there's a reason why both races at Daytona and Talladega are sellouts or damn near. It's because of the show that you get. So before we get all of our panties in a wad and start overreacting to a couple of cars and some bad wrecks, one, honestly, it flipped a long time. I can't say I've never seen a car flip like that because I've seen Davey flip down the straightaway. I watched Rusty Wallace. I've watched Richard Petty. I've watched Dale Earnhardt. I watched Bill Elliott. I've watched drivers roll down the super speedway straightaway, in the grass. And, it never gets easier to watch. But thankfully, in most of these situations, the driver walks away because the car does what it's supposed to do. And with that, I'll bring in the rest of my crew, Taz Taylor and Miss Lee Reed. How are you guys doing today?
Doing good. And I agree 100%, and we've had this discussion many times before, and that is that, you know, the safety innovations that have been made with this car are doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're keeping these drivers safe. You know, thank God neither of them were seriously hurt, neither of the Ryans. You know, they were able to walk away, and that's because of the safety innovations that this new car brought. We can complain about this car all we want and about, you know, how hard it is to pass and how it's affected the racing. But from a safety aspect, I'm 100% a believer.
Cass Taylor.
Yeah, I feel like the safety aspect has improved. To start, for the most part, yeah, but it did have its flaws, and we saw it last year, obviously with the concussions with Bowman and Kurt Busch. Luckily, Bowman's able to recover. Unfortunately, Kurt Busch wasn't able to. With that being said, I mean, we've seen head-on collisions, and we saw a head-on collision that Ryan Blaney took that looked very similar to Dale Earnhardt's head-on wreck, and he walked out like as if nothing had ever happened. So obviously safety improvements have been made, and we have seen similar head-on collisions end up in concussions with these next-gen cars. And obviously with the safety changes, it obviously shows that the changes they made, they're in the right direction. They still have a long way to go, I feel like, but at least we know they're making improvements to keep going in that right direction. I don't know if any injuries have been reported for Ryan Preece. If he were to suffer any, as far as I know, there wasn't any, which thankfully
no, they're saying
for that.
They're saying Preece is expected to race next week. They're telling him to lay low for the week, but he's expected to be in the car at this point.
Oh, perfect. Even better.
Yeah,
I mean, that was
we've been worried about broken backs and all kinds of situations because of the way that the car flipped and landed on the ground. But obviously, Ryan Preece is one tough cookie.
That's for sure. Because I mean, he, like I said, we all looked at it, and literally, I thought I felt like my breath was taken away from me for a few seconds there because I couldn't believe how violent that was, and sitting there thinking, oh to God, like he's not severely hurt or, you know, dead or anything like that. And when I saw him get out of the car, it made me feel a lot better that he was moving and under his own power. And yeah, they told him to go on the stretcher, which obviously for safety reasons. I'm glad they did that just in case of, you know, something was off with his back or maybe rib cage problem. You know, that could lead to serious injuries. Well, even more serious injuries than what happened. So, like I said, NASCAR's made safety improvements on these next gens, and we're heading in the right direction.
I agree totally. And both of these incidents, though it did look like even Ryan Blaney might have got his bell rung. You know, the fact of it is we expect spectacular. And there is nothing in sports that can mimic what we see at places like the Indianapolis 500 or the Daytona 500 or Talladega. These race tracks have been made history. I mean, been bred on the fact that they are spectacular. And when you wreck at one of these places, it's most of the time, you know, something that you've never seen before, something that you really don't want to see again. But that's the sense of danger that I believe all of us are attracted to in the sport. Nobody wants to see anybody hurt. But what we do is we've watched these spectacular crashes, and we've, you know, it's I hate to say it in a way that's disrespectful. It's entertaining, right? As long as nobody's getting killed. So as long as people are walking away from it, it is entertaining. I understand that anything can happen, but, you know, I heard Dan Patrick say this earlier today. It's like the Unibomb, the shoe bomb. Like, there was one guy who carried a shoe onto a plane, and since then, for 20 years, we've continuously had to take our shoes off at the airport. Is it because we're afraid that something's gonna mimic it? And, you know, I believe that this form of racing is it can't be repeated. You'll never see another Talladega built. You won't see another Daytona built. You won't see even a facility such as Indianapolis ever built again. But we're not, those diehard race fans, we don't want to see it go away. If we can figure out a way to get these cars to stay on the ground, I think we would all be a lot happier. But the racing in itself there creates these spectacular crashes. And it's all part of the entertainment. It's all part of what the lure of us. I mean, you know, I take my family, we sit in front of this fence for, you know, 188 laps, 188 times plus overtime. They pass this one section of the fence. And at any point in time, you could be chop suey. You know, I mean, it does go through your mind when you're sitting there like, my gosh, I hope the rig doesn't start coming out of that right there, you know. But at the same time, do I not go anymore because I'm fearful of something like that happening? No, and these drivers are not going to fear getting into these race cars and going out and putting on a spectacular show for us. I thought it was a decent race. You know, it seems like every time NASCAR tries to sell you all week long, it's going to be huge crashes and who's going to survive, you know.